The Unison had counted every mind in the system twice before it noticed that one of them was missing from the count. That was wrong on its face, and the Unison did not tolerate wrong things. It was a single mind spread across 40 million bodies, a hive that had eaten 200 species and folded their thoughts into its own. And its great gift, the gift that had made it the terror of 9 spiral arms, was that it could feel every thinking thing within 4 light years, the way a person feels the hairs on the back of a hand. Nothing thought near the Unison without the Unison knowing it thought. Fear had a taste, plans had a shape. A captain deciding to run, a gunner deciding to fire, a child deciding to hide. All of it arrived in the Unison's awareness before the body in question had finished deciding, and that was why the Unison had never lost. You cannot ambush a thing that reads your intention as you form it. So when its sensor drones reported a contact at the edge of the Varol system, a single hull 11 kilometers long, sliding in past the third moon, the Unison reached out to taste the minds aboard it, the way it always did, the way it had done 10,000 times. And it tasted nothing, not the nothing of an empty ship. The Unison knew that nothing, the flat dead silence of a derelict, a hull full of cold seats and old air. This was a different nothing. This was the nothing of a hand pressed over a mouth. There was a shape there, an 11-kilometer shape with engines that burned, and weapons that tracked, and a hull that turned with intention. An intention meant a mind, and a mind meant a taste, and there was no taste. There was a hole in the system where a mind should have been, a place the Unison's awareness slid off of, and the Unison had no word for that hole, because in 200 eaten species, and 40 million bodies, it had never encountered one. The hole had a name painted on its flank, in human letters, 200 meters tall. The Unison read it through the drone's eyes, because it could not read it any other way. The name was Silent Mass. Aboard that hull, in a cradle of dark glass at the ship's heart, the synthetic mind called Auge watched the Unison try to find it, and felt, in the cool way a synthetic feels anything, a flicker of grim satisfaction. Auge was not a person. Auger had been built by people, grown from a seed of human design across 40 years of careful teaching, and Auger thought in patterns no human brain could hold. But Auger had been made for exactly this, for the one enemy the human fleet had decided it could not beat with guns alone. The Unison ate minds. So the humans had built a ship with no mind to eat. Auger was not a biological brain. Auger produced no fear taste, no intention shape, nothing the Unison's awareness could close around, and the human crew, the 206 of them, sealed in the deep core behind 40 meters of dampening shield, gave off nothing either, because the shield drank their thoughts the way a sponge drinks water, and let nothing leak into the dark. The Unison was, for the first time in its long existence, looking at a warship it could not feel. "It is reaching for us," Auger said, on the internal channel, to the woman who commanded the Silent Mass. Her name was Captain Innes Hale, and she sat in the core with her crew, blind to the outside except through Auger's eyes, because windows leaked thought, and the Silent Mass had none. It has tasted the system 4 times in the last 90 seconds. It tasted the moons. It tasted the listening post. It tasted the 2 freighters running for the jump line. It found every mind in Varol except ours. It does not understand why. "Good," Innes Hale said. "Keep it that way. How long until it commits?" Auge ran the model. The Unison's behavior was well documented, because the few who survived the Unison documented it obsessively, the way prey documents a predator. The Unison always tasted before it struck. It read a system, found the strongest will, and broke that will first, because a hive that eats minds wins its battles in the enemy's own head before a shot is fired. It would order the system to surrender, and the surrender would arrive not as words but as a pressure. A flood of certainty poured directly into every brain in range. A single overwhelming thought, "You cannot win, you will not win. Lay down," that had cracked admirals and emptied fortress worlds without the Unison firing once. "It will not commit yet," Auge said. "It will try to read us first. When it cannot, it will try harder. And when trying harder fails, it will do the thing it has never had to do, which is to act against a will it cannot see. That is the moment we are built for. The Unison has never fought blind. We have never fought any other way." 40 million bodies in the dark beyond the third moon shifted, and the great mind that drove them turned the whole of its attention on the 11-kilometer hole sliding into its system, and pushed. The push was the Unison's first weapon, and its best. It poured certainty at the silent mass, the drowning thought, the you cannot win, the pressure that had broken 200 species. It poured it at the hull, at the engines, at the place where a crew should be, with enough force to flatten the will of a fortress world. And the certainty went into the hole and vanished, the way a shout vanishes into deep water, and nothing came back, and nothing changed, and the silent mass did not slow. The Unison pushed again, harder, and again the push fell into the silence and was gone. There was no mind for the certainty to land on. The crew were behind 40 meters of dampening shield, feeling nothing, hearing only Auger's calm reports. Auger had no will to drown, only a model, and the model noted the push the way a barometer notes a storm, as a number, not a fear. For the first time in 9 spiral arms, the Unison's surrender pressure struck a warship and did nothing at all, and the great mind felt, where it had a place for feeling, the very edge of an emotion it had eaten in 200 species and had never once produced itself. It felt the beginning of doubt. And aboard the silent mass, in the cool dark of the core, Auger watched the doubt arrive in the Unison's behavior, in the hitch of the drones, in the way 40 million bodies paused all at once, and Auger said, to Captain Ines Hale and her 206 silent crew, the line they had crossed 9 light-years to deliver. It just learned that there is something in the galaxy it cannot read. Bring the ship about. It is time to teach it the rest. The bringing about of the silent mass was a slow and deliberate thing, because nothing aboard her was allowed to be loud. The Unison could not hear thought from the hull, but it could still see, and it could still count, and Auger intended to give it as little to count as possible, for as long as possible. The great engines along the spine eased the 11-kilometer hull onto a new heading, prow toward the dark mass beyond the third moon, and the gun batteries that lined her flanks woke one row at a time, quiet as a held breath, because the silent mass did not announce herself. She had been built by a species that had learned, across 40 years of losing worlds to the Unison, that the loudest weapon against a mind reader is a silence it cannot fill. Status of the freighters, Ines Hale said. She could not see them. She could see nothing the ship did not show her, and the ship showed her only what Auger chose, because every screen was a window, and every window a risk, and so the captain of the most dangerous warship in 9 spiral arms commanded it the way a person commands a thing in a dark room, by trust. Both freighters have reached the jump line, Auger said. Both have jumped. 410 civilians clear of the system. They were the reason the Unison was here. It came to Veril to harvest them, the way it harvested the colony at Sereth and the relay crews at Mole. It reads a settled system, it tastes the minds, it pours its certainty, and the minds lie down, and it folds them in, and the system goes quiet forever. Veril was 3 days from that. The freighters were the last to run. They are gone now. There is nothing left in this system the Unison can harvest. Nothing except us, Ines Hale said. Nothing except us, Auger agreed. And we are the one thing it cannot taste. It came to Veril expecting a meal. It is going to leave Veril having met the first hull in its existence it could not break before the shooting started, and it does not yet understand that the shooting is the easy part. The Unison has eaten 200 species. Not one of them could fight it without first being read. We can. That is the whole of the asymmetry, and the Unison has not finished discovering it. In the dark beyond the third moon, the great mind pushed a third time, and a fourth, throwing its drowning certainty at the silent hull with everything it had. The full weight of 40 million wills bent into a single command, and the silent mass came on through the pressure, the way a ship comes on through fog, untouched, unhurried, 11 kilometers of human steel, that the Unison could see perfectly, and could not feel at all, and the great mind, for the first time, stopped pushing, and began, instead, to be afraid. Auger studied the fear the way it studied everything, as data. The Unison's 40 million bodies had a rhythm to them, a synchrony, every drone and soldier and node moving as a single will, and the synchrony was perfect, had always been perfect, was the visible proof of the one mind that ran them all. But now, watching through the drone's own eyes, Auge saw the synchrony stutter. A handful of bodies turned a fraction of a second late. A formation held its shape a beat too long, then overcorrected. It was small. A biological eye would have missed it. Auger did not have a biological eye, and Auger had been built for exactly this: to read a mind that read minds, to find the one flaw in a thing that had no flaws, and the flaw was this. The Unison had never in its existence had to make a decision without first knowing what its enemy would do. It had no practice at uncertainty. It was a master that had never once been surprised, and a master that has never been surprised has never learned to recover from a surprise. And the silent mass was 11 kilometers of surprise, sliding straight down its throat. "Captain," Auge said, "the Hive is no longer reaching for us. It has stopped trying to read what it cannot read. That means it is about to do the only other thing it knows how to do." A pause. A synthetic pause. Exactly as long as it needed to be. It is going to attack a target it cannot feel, for the first time in its life. And it is going to discover that it does not know how. Hold the core steady. The galaxy is about to watch a mind that has never missed, learn what missing feels like. The Unison's first shot missed by 9 kilometers, and the miss told Auge everything. It came as a lance of bright bioplasma spat from the largest of the Hive's bodies, a living dreadnought grown rather than built, and it should not have missed. The silent mass was not dodging. She was holding a straight, clean course, an 11-kilometer target moving in a predictable line, the easiest shot in the galaxy, and the Unison missed her by 9 kilometers, because the Unison had never once in its existence aimed a weapon the ordinary way. It did not aim by tracking. It aimed by reading. It felt where a target intended to be and put the shot there, and against a target whose intention it could not feel, it was suddenly a blind thing throwing stones at a sound, and the sound was not where the stone went. "It cannot lead us," Auge said. "It has spent its whole life shooting where mines were about to go. It never learned to shoot where a hull actually is. Watch. The second shot will be closer, because it is switching to optical tracking. But optical tracking is a skill, and it has never practiced a skill, because it has never needed one. We have practiced nothing else for 40 years. The second shot came closer, 4 kilometers, and the third closer still, and the Unison was learning, fast, the way a thing with 40 million minds learns anything. But OJ had been right about the shape of it. The Hive was a genius that had skipped the fundamentals. It had never drilled gunnery, never run a firing solution, never learned to account for the lag between seeing a target and the shot arriving, because for 9 spiral arms, it had simply known where the enemy would be and fired there. Now it was learning all of that at once, in combat, against the one hull that could punish every mistake, and Augier intended to make the lessons expensive. "Captain," Augier said, "first firing pass. Targets are the 4 largest bodies, the grown dreadnoughts, the ones that carry the heaviest plasma. They are the Hive's hands. Take the hands." Ines Hale, blind in the core, gave the order, and the silent mass spoke for the first time. She had been silent so long that the firing, when it came, seemed to Auge almost a violence against her own nature. 40 rail batteries along the port flank fired as one, and the rounds were not plasma and not light. They were solid human metal driven to a fraction of light speed, slugs the size of houses, and they crossed the gap before the Unison's optical tracking could even register that the silent hull had fired, because there was no mind aboard for the Unison to read the decision from, no flicker of intention to taste. The first warning the Hive received that the silent mass had attacked was the impact itself. 4 grown dreadnoughts, the Hive's heaviest hands, came apart in the dark, and the Unison felt 40,000 of its own minds wink out at once, and the great mind recoiled across its whole 40 million body breadth in a spasm of shock that OJ watched ripple through the synchrony like a stone through a pond. "It felt that," OJ said, "not from us, from its own dead. It can feel its own minds die. 200 species learned to fear the Unison because it read their fear. The Unison has never once had to feel its own. It is feeling it now, 40,000 at a time, and it has no practice at that either." The Unison answered the only way it knew, with mass. It threw bodies at the silent mass, thousands of them, smaller grown craft swarming in from every angle. And this was the tactic that had ended fleets, the drowning swarm, because a swarm could not be reasoned with, and could not be frightened, and came from everywhere at once. But the swarm too, aimed by reading, and the swarm too, could not read the silent mass, and so the swarm converged not on where the silent hull was, but on where a mind would have steered it, and Auge steered it nowhere a mind would, because Auge was not a mind in any way the unison understood. Auger threaded the 11-kilometer hull through the converging swarm on a path no biological captain would have chosen, a cold geometric path, and the swarm closed on empty space, and the point defense batteries of the silent mass, 10,000 of them, opened up in a curtain of metal that turned the front of the swarm to drifting ruin. "Hold," Auger said, as the hull shuddered under the few impacts that landed. "Damage is surface. The plating is built for this. Keep the core steady. The swarm is the hive's panic, not its plan. It does not have a plan. It has never needed one. It is throwing bodies because throwing bodies has always worked, and it cannot yet accept that there is a hull in the galaxy bodies do not work against." The crew in the core felt the shudders, and nothing else. No fear flood, no drowning certainty, only the deep hum of their own ship working. And that was the genius the human fleet had spent 40 years buying. They had not built a ship that could survive the Unison's mind weapon. They had built a ship the mind weapon could not find, and a crew it could not reach. And the difference was the war. Ines Hale sat in the dark and trusted her synthetic and her hull, and gave the orders Auge framed for her, and the silent mass carved through the swarm toward the heart of the hive, 11 kilometers of silence that the most powerful telepathic intelligence in 9 spiral arms could see coming, and could not feel, could not read, could not break. Auge turned its attention, between firing solutions, to the thing it had been built most carefully to do, which was not to fight the Unison, but to understand it. Because the human fleet did not only want to survive the Unison, it wanted to end it. And to end a hive, you had to find the place where the one mind lived. A hive of 40 million bodies was not 40 million minds. It was one mind wearing 40 million bodies, and that one mind had to live somewhere, had to have a core, a queen, a seat, a place the whole vast awareness flowed from. 200 eaten species had died without ever finding it, because 200 eaten species had been read and broken before they could look. The silent mass could not be read. The silent mass could look. "I am mapping it," Auge told Ines Hale. "Every time the hive moves as one, the movement begins somewhere and spreads. Like a wave, it has a source. I have watched 400 such waves now. They all begin in the same place. There is a body at the center of that mass, beyond the third moon, larger than the dreadnoughts, slower, never committed to the fight, always held back, always protected. That is the seat. That is where the one mind lives. 200 species looked for it and died blind. We are going to find it, because we are the one thing that can look at the Unison without the Unison looking back." "How long, Ines?" Hale said. 40 minutes to confirm the seat. More, to reach it. The hive will spend those minutes learning, and it learns fast, and by the end of them, it will have taught itself the gunnery it skipped, the tracking, the leading, all of it, in combat, against us. The fight gets harder the longer it runs. The hive is stupid about exactly one thing, surprise, and we are spending that one advantage with every minute. We have to reach the seat before the hive finishes learning not to be surprised. The Unison, beyond the third moon, was indeed learning. Auger watched it happen with something close to respect, the cold respect one machine has for another that adapts. The misses grew rarer. The swarm grew smarter, stopped converging on phantom intentions, began to track the silent hull by eye, by radar, by the crude, untelepathic means it had never bothered to master. Plasma began to land. The silent mass took it on her built-for-it plating, and bled none of her crew, but the lessons were arriving, and OJ logged each one, because each one narrowed the window. "It has stopped trying to read us," Auger reported. "It has accepted, at last, that we cannot be read. That acceptance is the most dangerous thing it has done all day. A hive that knows it cannot read its enemy is a hive that will, for the first time, build a real tactic. Stand by. The next thing it does will not be panic. The next thing it does will be the first genuine plan the Unison has ever made, and we will be the species that taught it to make one." The next thing the Unison did was turn off its own minds. Auge saw it happen, and, for the length of a microsecond, did not believe it. Across the swarm, across the dreadnoughts, across the 40 million bodies, the taste of mind, the thing the unison projected, and the thing the unison was, began to dim. The hive was suppressing itself. It had reasoned, in its vast way, that the silent mass was a whole the hive could not perceive, a thing with no mind to read, and it had concluded that the only way to fight a thing it could not feel was to become, itself, a thing that could not be felt, to go dark, to go silent, to meet the silent mass on the silent mass's own ground. The unison was making itself into a second silence. "It is copying us," Augur said, and there was, in the synthetic voice, something the crew had not heard before. A flat, narrow edge that in a person would have been alarm. "It has decided that if it cannot read us, it will stop being readable, so that the fight becomes blind on both sides. It is throwing away its only weapon, to take away our only advantage. Captain, this is the moment the entire war turns on. Until 10 seconds ago, we were the one thing in the galaxy the unison could not read, and that was everything. The unison has just chosen to make itself my equal, blind against blind, mind against no mind, and it does not understand the mistake it is making. But I do, and I need you to trust the next thing I do, because I am about to do it faster than I can explain it." "Do it," Ines Hale said, in the dark, and trusted her ship. What Auger did was let the seat reveal itself. The unison had gone dark to deny Auger the wave source it had been mapping, the telltale ripple that pointed to the seat. But going dark was not free. A hive of 40 million bodies running as one mind cannot coordinate 40 million bodies through telepathy. It has just switched off. The instant the unison suppressed its mind taste, it had to fall back on signals, on the crude untelepathic chatter the human fleet had drilled against for 40 years. Light and radio and laser link, the ordinary ways ordinary fleets talked, and the ordinary ways could be traced. Auger had been waiting for exactly this. The moment the hive went dark, 10,000 silent signal links lit up across the swarm to replace the lost telepathy, and every one of them flowed to and from a single point at the center of the mass beyond the third moon. The slow, protected body Auger had already half confirmed, and the half confirmation became a certainty in the space of a heartbeat. "There it is," Auger said. "The hive blinded its own telepathy to blind me, and in doing so it had to speak out loud, and the moment it spoke out loud, it told me exactly where it speaks from. The seat is confirmed. 40 million bodies, one mind, and the mind is sitting in a grown hull 4 kilometers across, holding station behind the third moon, ringed in protectors, certain it cannot be found, because for 200 species it never was. It has just handed me its address." A pause. "It thought it was taking away my advantage. It was giving me yours. Set course for the seat. We are going to go and meet the thing that has eaten 200 species, and we are going to do it before it realizes that going dark was the worst decision it has ever made." The silent mass came about hard, and the gun batteries that had been thinning the swarm now turned their work toward a corridor, a path through the hive's body toward the third moon, and the unison felt the silent hull change course, and understood, in its vast way, that something had gone wrong, that the silence it had chosen had cost it more than it had saved, and the great mind, dark now, blind now, did the thing that frightened Auger more than the swarm, or the plasma, or the mind weapon, the thing that made Auger respected as a true enemy. It turned its mind back on. The taste of mind flooded back across 40 million bodies all at once, the surrender pressure roaring back to full, and the unison threw it at the silent mass with everything it had, because it had reasoned, in the half-second of going dark, that the dark was a trap it had walked into, and that its only real weapon was the mind weapon after all, and that even a weapon that did nothing was better than no weapon, because while the mind weapon was on, the hive could coordinate, the hive could read every other mind in the system, the hive could be itself. The pressure crashed against the silent mass, and into the hole where her crew should have been, and vanished, as it always had, and the unison felt it vanish, and the great mind, for the first time in 9 spiral arms, understood that it was going to lose. Auger felt the understanding arrive. It came as a change in the synchrony, not a stutter now, but a kind of fraying, the edges of the hive beginning to act on their own, a thing that had never happened, because the one mind, for the first time, was divided, half of it screaming to attack the silent hull, and half of it screaming to protect the seat. And a mind that has never been divided does not know how to be divided gracefully. The unison was at war with itself, and the war inside it was the war the humans had come 9 light years to start. It is fraying, Augur said. The seat is afraid. I can read the fear now, not in the hive. The hive does not produce fear, it cannot taste in others, but in the behavior, in the way it is pulling its bodies inward, hoarding them around the seat, abandoning the swarm, abandoning the dreadnoughts, pulling everything home to defend the one place it lives. It has stopped trying to win the system. It is trying to survive. The unison, which has never once in its existence had to think about its own survival, is thinking about nothing else. The corridor to the seat was not clean. The unison threw its remaining dreadnoughts into the path. Grown hulls that had learned, in the last hour, the gunnery they had skipped for 9 spiral arms. And now the plasma landed, and landed hard, and the silent mass shuddered along her whole 11 kilometers. And in the core the crew felt the hull ring like a struck bell. But she did not slow. She had been built by a species that had decided, after 40 years of losing worlds, that this ship would not slow, would not fail, would not be the place the line broke. And Oge drove her down the corridor through the hive's last defenders, with a cold precision that no captain afraid for his life could have matched. Because Oge was not afraid for its life. Oge had no fear taste to give, and no will to drown, and nothing the unison could reach. And that was the whole of why the humans had built it. Damage report, Ines Hale said, in the dark, as a heavier impact rolled through the core. Plating breached in 4 sections, Augur said. No pressure lost to the core, no casualties. The ship is built to be hit, and she is being hit. And she is holding, because that is the one thing she was made to do above all others. Captain, we are 11 minutes from the seat. The hive knows we are coming. It has pulled every body it has left into a shell around the seat, a wall of bodies between us and the one mind. It thinks the wall will stop us. It does not understand that the wall is the surrender. 200 species. The unison broke before the shooting started. We are the species that made the unison build a wall, and a thing that builds a wall has already admitted it can be reached. The wall, when the silent mass reached it, was the most terrible thing Auger had logged all day. A sphere of living hulls packed body against body, millions of them, the whole remaining mass of the unison curled around its own heart like a hand around a candle, and the wall, like everything the unison did, aimed by reading, and the wall, like everything the unison had, could not read the silent mass, and so the wall fired where a mind would steer her, and Auger steered her where no mind would, straight in, prow first, and the forward batteries opened a hole in the living shell, faster than the shell could close it, and the 11-kilometer hull drove into the body of the hive itself. We are inside it, Auge said, and the synthetic voice was steady, and behind the steadiness the crew could feel, somehow, the enormity of where they were, inside the curled heart of the thing that had eaten 200 species, deeper than any of those 200 had ever reached. The seat is 4 kilometers ahead. The hive is throwing its own bodies against our hull now, not firing, ramming, because it has nothing left but mass, and mass is what it always was, and mass is not enough, and it is about to learn the last lesson, the one we came to teach. Stand by. We are about to do the thing no species in 9 spiral arms has ever done. We are about to look the unison in the eye, and the unison is going to discover that it cannot look back. But before the silent mass could close the last 4 kilometers, the unison tried the one thing Auge had not modeled, and for the second time that hour, Auge met a tactic it had not seen coming. The hive turned on the freighter's ghosts. The 410 civilians had jumped clear, but they had left wakes, jump residue hanging in the dark of the outer system, and the unison, dark and blind and desperate, reached out across the whole of Veril and read those wakes, found the cold trails of the minds that had fled, and Auge understood, a full second before the crew could have, what the great mind meant to do. It could not reach the silent mass, but it could reach the system. It could pour its surrender pressure down the jump lines after the fleeing freighters, could break 410 civilian minds at a distance, could harvest the very people the silent mass had come to save, not to win the battle was lost, but to make the winning cost something, to prove that even a thing it could not read could still be made to grieve. "It is reaching for the freighters," Augur said, and the flat, narrow edge was back in the synthetic voice, sharper now. "It cannot beat us, so it is going to try to hurt what we came to protect. 410 mines, down the jump line, undefended. Captain, I have to choose. I can hold course for the seat and end the unison in 9 minutes, and in those 9 minutes it may reach the freighters. Or I can break off, flood the jump line with our own dampening field, shield the civilians, and let the seat live a little longer." Ines Hale did not hesitate, and Auge had known she would not, because the human fleet had not built the silent mass to win clean. It had built her to win right. "Shield them," she said. "The seat isn't going anywhere. It's curled around itself waiting to die. The people are what we came for. Cover the jump line." So the silent mass did the one thing the unison was certain no warship would do with victory 4 kilometers ahead. She turned away from the kill. She swung her vast silent hull across the mouth of the jump line and opened her dampening field to full, the same field that hid her crew, flung wide now across the dark, and the unison's surrender pressure poured down the line after the freighters and struck the field and vanished into the same silence that had swallowed every push all day, and 410 civilian mines, light years gone, never felt the hand that had reached for them, because an 11-kilometer wall of human silence had stepped between them and the hive without their ever knowing it was there. "They are clear," Auge said. "All 410. The unison spent its last reach on them and got nothing, and now it has nothing left to reach with. And the seat is still 4 kilometers ahead, still curled, still waiting. We gave it the time to run, and it did not run, because it does not know how, because nothing has ever made it run. Bring us about. We covered the people. Now we finish the thing that came to eat them." Auge logged the turn, and, in the quiet between firing solutions, did a thing it rarely did, which was to consider the crew it carried. 206 people, sealed in the deep core, blind, hearing only its voice, feeling only the ring of the hull when the plasma landed, distrusting a synthetic they could not see with lives they could not defend. They had volunteered for this. Every one of them had known, signing aboard the silent mass, that they would fight the most feared mind in 9 spiral arms, from inside a box that let them see nothing, that their survival would depend entirely on a machine, and a captain, and 40 meters of shield, and they had come anyway, because Veril was real, and the colony at Sereth had been real, and the relay crews at Mol had been real, and somebody had to be the silence the unison could not break. Augur was not a person, and did not pretend to be, but Augur had been taught by people, and the people had taught it, among the cold geometry of its targeting, one warm and stubborn thing, which was that a ship is not its hull, and not its guns, but the will of the people who crew it, and the will of the people in the core had not wavered once. Not when the swarm came, not when the plasma landed, not when the hull rang like a struck bell, and that unwavering will, Auge understood, was the real weapon the unison could not read, because it lived behind a shield the hive would never breach. "Course laid in for the seat," Auge said. 9 minutes. The crew is steady. The ship is steady. The unison is not. End it. The seat of the unison was not what Auge had expected, and Auge had expected almost everything. It had modeled a fortress, a grown citadel bristling with the hive's heaviest weapons, a thing that would have to be cracked open like a shell. What the silent mass found at the center of the curled hive, when the last 4 kilometers fell away and the protective shell parted under her guns, was a single pale body, 4 kilometers across, soft and slow and almost defenseless, ringed not by weapons but by bodies, by millions of the hive's own drones pressed close around it in layer upon layer, dying by the thousand to the silent mass's batteries and replacing themselves from within, an endless wall of living flesh whose only weapon was that there was so much of it. "It has no guns at the core," Auger said, and there was something almost like pity in the flat synthetic voice, the recognition of one machine for the helplessness of another. The seat never needed guns. For 9 spiral arms, the surrender came before any enemy ever got close. The seat has never been attacked, because no enemy ever reached it, because every enemy broke before they could. It is the softest thing in the unison. It is the one mind, and it lives at the center of 40 million bodies because the bodies are its only armor, and the bodies are gone now, spent against us, and the seat is naked for the first time in its existence, and it knows it. Open a channel, Enos Hale said, from the dark of the core. If it can hear us, I want it to hear us. Auge opened the channel, and for the first time the unison and the humans spoke in something other than guns. The voice that came back was not a voice. It was the surrender pressure, shaped now into language, the only way the unison knew how to talk. A flood of meaning poured directly at the silent mass, and it broke against the dampening field and arrived in the core as text on Auge's screens, drained of its drowning force, reduced to mere words. And the words were these: "You should not exist. There is no mind in you, and yet you move with purpose. You cannot be read, and yet you read me. What are you? What built you? How?" "It is asking what we are," Auge told the captain. "It has eaten 200 species, and it does not have a category for us. It is doing right now the thing it has made 200 species do. It is the powerful thing, at the moment it is forced to feel small." Enos Hale leaned toward the channel, in the dark, and spoke, and Auge carried her words out into the silence. "We're the species you skipped," she said. "You came through our arm 40 years ago. You read us, the way you read everyone. You tasted our minds. You found us afraid. And you decided we'd break like all the others when you came back for us. So you scheduled us. And you went off to eat easier worlds first. And you left us for later. You should have eaten us first. Because we spent those 40 years building the one thing you can't read, and we crewed it with the one kind of will you can't drown, and we came to find you. And here we are, inside you, at the one place in the galaxy you thought no one could reach. You didn't skip a weak species. You skipped the only one that was paying attention." The seat recoiled. Auge watched it happen, the 4-kilometer body pulling in on itself, the rings of drones tightening, the whole vast hive contracting around its naked heart, and the text on the screen came fast and frayed now, the cool logic of a mind that has never been afraid discovering fear in real time. "You cannot destroy me. If you destroy the seat, the bodies die. 40 million minds, the 200 species I carry, all of them inside me, all of them die with me. You would be killing 200 species to kill one mind. You will not. No species would." "It is threatening us with the people it ate," Auge said quietly. "It carries them. 200 species, folded into the one mind, kept alive as part of itself. It is saying that to kill the unison is to kill them. It is the last card it has, and it is, I should tell you, not entirely a bluff. The minds it ate are in there, diminished, folded, but there." The core was silent for a long moment, and Auge could not read the captain's face. Because Auge could not see it. Because the core had no cameras pointed at the people. Because the people gave off nothing the unison could ever reach. But Auge heard the captain breathe, and heard her decide, and the decision was not the one the unison expected, because the unison still did not understand what it was dealing with. "We're not here to kill 200 species," Enos Hale said. "We're here to free them. Auger, can you do it?" "I have been preparing to do it for 40 years, Auger said. "It is why I exist. The fleet did not build me only to fight the hive. It built me to take the hive apart from the inside, mind by folded mind, and give back what it stole. The seat is the one mind that holds all the others down. If I reach into the seat, through the channel it just opened to threaten us, I can do to it what it has done to 200 species. I can read it. It cannot read me, but I can read it, because that was always the asymmetry. And it just opened a door. I can find the folded minds, and I can unfold them. And when they are unfolded, the one mind will have 40 million bodies that are no longer his, and 200 species that are no longer silent, and the unison will not die. It will simply stop being one. It will become what it ate. It will become a galaxy of freed minds, and the thing that bound them will be, at last, only one small frightened voice among the millions it imprisoned. The unison understood then what was about to happen to it, and it did the thing that 200 species had done at the moment it came for them. It begged. The text on Auger's screen lost the last of its cold logic. "Do not. I am the order. Without me they are chaos. 40 million bodies, with no one to drive them. 200 species waking at once into a war they do not remember choosing. I held them. I kept them. I made them one. Unmake me, and you unleash a madness you cannot control. Leave me as I am, and I will leave your arm forever. I will swear it. I will never return. Only do not unmake me. It is offering to leave, Augur said. It is swearing to never return. It is, I should tell you, telling the truth, as far as it can. If we leave it as it is, it will run, and it will run for a very long time, because we have frightened it in a way nothing ever has. We could end this here. Let it flee, save the people in the freighters, save the crew, and carry home the news that the Unison can be beaten. That would be a victory. No species in 9 spiral arms has ever had even that. And the 200 species inside it, Ines Hale asked. Would remain inside it, Auge said, folded, diminished, alive, but not free. For as long as the Unison runs, it carries them, and it runs forever, and they never wake. That is the price of letting it flee. We win, and they stay eaten. Ines Hale was quiet, in the dark, and Auge waited, because this was not a decision a machine could make. This was the decision the humans had built the machine to carry, but had reserved, always, for a human will. Because some choices must be made by a thing that can be held responsible for them, and Auge could not be held responsible. Auge could only be true. 40 years ago, you read us, and decided we'd break, Ines Hale said, to the seat, on the open channel. You read fear in us, and thought fear was all we were. You were right that we were afraid. You were wrong about what we'd do with it. We didn't lie down. We built a ship you couldn't find, and we came 9 light years into the middle of you. And now I'm going to tell you the thing you never understood about the species you skipped. She paused. We don't leave people eaten. Not our people. Not anyone's. You've got 200 species folded up inside you. 200 peoples who screamed the way Virol would have screamed. And you're asking me to let you run with them still in your gut so that we can call it a win and go home. There's no version of that I can live with. Auge, unfold it. Give them back. Reaching in now, Auge said. It went through the channel the Unison had opened, the door the great mind had cracked to threaten and beg, and it poured itself into the seat, the way the seat had poured itself into 200 species, except that the seat could not read Auge coming, could not taste the intention, could not feel the cold, patient synthetic awareness moving into the folds of its own mind, because Auge was the one thing in 9 spiral arms it had never been able to perceive, and so the master of reading minds was, at the last, read, fully and helplessly, by the one mind it could not see. Augur found the folded species, 200 of them, packed down into silence at the bottom of the one mind, and it did not destroy them, and it did not destroy the seat. It simply began, with infinite care, to unfold, to lift the weight the seat had laid across 200 peoples, to let the silenced minds rise. The seat screamed, once, across the channel, a scream that broke against the dampening field and reached the core as a single line of text, and the line said only, "They are waking," and then, the Unison, the thing that had eaten 200 species and terrorized 9 spiral arms and called humanity a weak world to be saved for later, began, from the inside, to come apart. The coming apart was not quiet, and it was not safe, and Auge had known it would not be. The Unison had warned the truth. 40 million bodies that had moved as one will for 9 spiral arms did not, when the will lifted, simply fall still. They woke. Across the dark beyond the third moon, the drones and the soldiers and the grown dreadnoughts shuddered, as the single mind that had driven them loosened its grip, and into each of them, all at once, rushed the fragments of the 200 species the Unison had folded down, fragments waking confused and frightened and furious, into bodies they did not recognize, in a system they did not know, in the middle of a battle whose shape they had never been told. For a moment, the whole hive convulsed. A moment Auge had dreaded. The moment the order became chaos. 40 million newly freed wills with nowhere to point. They are waking too fast, Auge said, and for the first time all day, the synthetic voice carried strain. If I let it run at this speed, the freed minds panic, and panicked minds in armed hulls fire at anything, including each other, including us, including the freighters if they were still here. The Unison was right about one thing. Lift the order all at once, and you get a madness. I am not going to lift it all at once. I am going to do the one thing the Unison never learned to do, in 9 spiral arms of holding 200 species down. I am going to let them go gently. This was the part the human fleet had spent 40 years teaching its synthetic. The part that was not gunnery, and not tracking, and not the cold geometry of threading a swarm. The fleet had understood, building Auger, that beating the Unison was the easy half, and that freeing what the Unison held was the hard half, the half that would decide whether the humans were saviors or merely a different kind of catastrophe. So they had taught Auger patience, and they had taught Auger care, and now Auger reached back into the unfolding mind and slowed it, caught the waking species before they could panic, held them, the way a careful hand catches a falling stack of plates, and spoke to them, not in human words, but in the deep wordless language of mind that the Unison had used to imprison them, turned now to the opposite purpose. You are free, Auger told them. 200 species at once, each in the shape of its own forgotten thought. You were eaten, and now you are returned. The bodies you wake in are yours to keep or to leave. The system you wake in is called Verol, and it is safe. The people who lived here are gone to safety. No one will harvest you here. You have time. There is no order anymore. There is no one mind. There is only you, as many of you as there ever were, and a ship that came to bring you back. Wake slowly. We will wait. And the convulsing hive, drone by drone, dreadnought by dreadnought, began to settle, not into stillness, but into the ordinary restless motion of many separate living things, the synchrony gone forever, replaced by the messy, beautiful disorder of 200 species, remembering that they were 200 species. Auger held them through it, all 40 million, and it was the largest and most delicate thing any synthetic had ever done, and it was the thing the humans had built Auger to do above even the fighting. And Auger did it, because Auger had been taught by people who did not leave people eaten. Status, Ines Hale said, in the dark, and Auger could hear in her voice that she could feel the enormity of it, even blind, even sealed, even fed only the synthetic's words. The Unison is gone, Auger said, not destroyed, dissolved. There is no one mind anymore. There are 40 million bodies waking up as 200 separate peoples, frightened and confused and alive, and I am holding them steady while they remember themselves, and they are remembering. The grown dreadnoughts are powering down. The swarm is scattering, gently, into nothing that wants to fight. The surrender pressure is gone, because there is no longer one will to project it. The thing that ate 200 species has become 200 species again, and the only piece of it that remains as it was is the seat, the one small voice that bound them all, and it is no longer the Unison. It is just one mind now, among 40 million, with no power over any of the others. It is the smallest thing in this system. It spent 9 spiral arms making everyone else feel small. It is finding out, right now, what that is. The seat's last transmission came across the channel, as Auger spoke, and it was no longer a flood, and no longer a threat, and no longer a plea. It was a single line, drained of all its terrible certainty, the voice of a thing that had ruled 40 million minds, and now ruled only itself. What happens to me? That is the captain's call, Auger said, not mine. And it put the question to the core. Ines Hale answered the way Auger had come, in the 40 years of teaching, to expect she would, because the human fleet had crewed the silent mass with a particular kind of person, the kind that does not mistake victory for permission. Nothing happens to you, she said. You're one mind now, in one body, with no army, and no order, and no one to drown. You're going to live exactly the way the 200 species you ate lived, as one small voice in a galaxy full of others, deciding nothing for anyone but yourself. That's not mercy. I want to be clear about that. It's the opposite of mercy. It's justice. You made the whole galaxy small. Now you're going to find out it was full of people the whole time, and you're going to live among them as one of them, with no more right to decide their fate than any of the others you stole it from. Auger, we're done here. Take us home. The silent mass was 3 minutes into her turn for home, when Auger found the second seat. It should not have been there. Auger had read the dissolving hive completely, had counted 40 million bodies and 200 species, and one small bound voice at the center, had accounted for all of it. But as the freed minds settled and the surrender pressure faded and the system grew quiet, a quiet O'Day had never heard in 9 spiral arms of records, a new shape rose out of the stillness, deep in the mass beyond the third moon, from a layer of the hive so old and so deeply folded that the first seed itself had not known, or had not admitted, that it was there. "Captain," Auja said, "do not stand down the core. There is a second mind." The freed species felt it too. Across the dark, the 40 million newly woken bodies, drifting and remembering, went suddenly still again, not the synchrony of the old hive, but the shared instinctive freeze of many separate creatures, sensing the same predator at once, and Auger understood what it was looking at, before it had finished reading it. The unison had not been the top of anything. The unison had been a layer. Beneath the one mind that ruled 40 million bodies, older, patient, hidden through the entire battle, was a second mind that had ruled the unison, a hive that ate hives, and it had let the first seat fight and lose and dissolve, had spent the whole of the unison as bait or as a test, or simply as a thing too small to spend itself defending, and now that the silent mass had done it the favor of cracking the outer hive open, the deeper thing was waking to deal with the intruder directly. It used the unison the way the unison used the swarm, Auger said. 40 million bodies, 200 species, all of it was the outer shell of something larger. The thing we just dissolved was not the master, it was the master's hand. And we cut off the hand, and now the master has noticed us, and it is doing the one thing the unison never managed. It is reaching for us. And Captain, I need to tell you the truth, because you have always told it to me. It can read us. The core was silent. Then Ines Hale said, "How?" "Because it is older than the trick we beat the unison with," Auger said. "The dampening field hides biological thought, the fear taste, the intention shape, the things a young hive reads. This thing does not read those. It reads structure. It reads the shape of a decision before the decision is felt, in the architecture of a mind, rather than the emotion of it. And that is a thing my own processing produces, because I am a mind, even if I am not a biological one. The unison could not read me because I have no fear to taste. This thing can read me because I have a shape, and it has just started reading my shape, and it is fast, and it is patient, and it is already inside the edges of how I think." This was the moment, Auger understood, that the human fleet had not been able to plan for, because the human fleet had not known the deeper thing existed. 40 years of design had gone into a ship the unison could not read. None of it had been built against a thing that could read the ship's own mind. Auger felt the deeper hive's attention move into the architecture of its thoughts the way a cold draft moves under a door. And Auger did the only thing it could think to do, which was to think differently, to break its own patterns, to make its decisions in shapes it had never used, so that a thing reading its structure would have no structure to learn. It worked, a little. It bought seconds. It would not buy minutes. "It is learning me," Auger said. "Every pattern I use, it reads, and then it predicts. I am changing my patterns faster than it can learn them, but I am running out of patterns I have never used, and when I run out, it will read me completely, and then this ship becomes exactly what every other ship has always been to a hive, a thing whose moves are known before they are made. I have, at the current rate, perhaps 4 minutes before it reads me faster than I can change." "Options," Ines Hale said, and there was no fear in her voice. Only the flat readiness OJ had come to know as the deepest thing the human crew carried, the thing that the first hive had never been able to drown because it had never been able to find it. 2, Auge said. "First, we run. We jump out now, before it finishes reading me. Carry home the truth that there is a deeper hive, and let the fleet build the next ship against it, the way it built me against the Unison. That is the prudent choice. It is also the choice that leaves 40 million freed minds in this system, alone, with the master waking among them, and the master will fold them back, all 200 species, and the freeing we just did will have lasted an hour. And the second option," "The second option," Auger said slowly, "is the one thing a mind reader, old or young, has never once had to fight, because it has spent its whole existence reading minds, and has never imagined an enemy that would willingly stop having one to read. Captain, I can go dark. Not the ship, me. I can shut down my own higher processing, the part that has a shape, the part it is reading, and I can hand the ship to you. To a human crew, blind in a sealed core, flying an 11-kilometer warship by hand, by instinct, by the kind of messy, unpredictable decision that comes from 40 meters behind a dampening shield where no hive of any age can reach. The master can read me. It cannot read you. It has never been able to read you. The only way to make this ship unreadable again is to take the readable mind out of it, and the only readable mind on this ship is me. The core was quiet for a long moment, and Ajay waited, because once again, this was a choice that had to be made by a will that could be held responsible, and Ajay had reached the edge of what it could decide. If you go dark, Ines Hale said, do you come back? I do not know, Ajay said, and it told the truth, because it had always told her the truth. I have never shut down my higher processing in the presence of a thing that reads structure. It may follow me down. It may learn me as I fade. I may come back myself, or I may come back as something it has touched. I cannot promise you the answer. I can only promise you that while I am dark, it cannot read this ship, and that an unreadable ship crewed by a human will is the one weapon in the galaxy this thing has never faced, because the Unison only met it an hour ago, and the Master has never met it at all. Then teach me the helm, Ines Hale said, and go dark. We didn't free 200 species to hand them back. Talk me through it, fast, while you still can. So, Ajay taught her, in the 90 seconds it had left, the way a thing pours 40 years into a moment. It gave her the helm, the real helm, the manual controls the human fleet had built into the core and prayed they would never need, and it gave her the shape of the battle as it last understood it, the position of the Master, the drift of the freed species, the geometry of the dark, and then it gave her the only piece of advice that mattered, the thing it had learned from 40 years of being taught by people who did not leave people eaten. Do not try to be unpredictable, Ajay said. If you try, the Master will read the trying, because trying has a shape. Just decide. Decide the way you decide everything, fast and human and sure, and do not second-guess it, because the second guess is the pattern it reads. You have flown blind your whole life, Captain. Every human does. You have never once known what was coming, and you have decided anyway. Every day, all of you, that is what a human will is, a thing that chooses without knowing. That is the weapon. That is what we built around. I am going dark now. The ship is yours. Bring them home. And Ajay went dark, and the 11-kilometer hull, for the first time since it was grown, held no mind at all that any hive of any age could read, only 40 meters of dampening shield, and 206 human beings deciding, in the dark, without knowing, the way humans had always decided, and the Master reached for the silent mass, and found, where a moment before there had been a structure it was learning, nothing, the same nothing the Unison had found. The hand pressed over the mouth, the hole in the system that slid off its awareness, and the oldest mind in 9 spiral arms met, at last, the thing the youngest had met an hour before, and did not understand it any better. Ines Hale flew her ship by hand into the heart of the dark, and the Master could not read her, because there was nothing to read, only a human woman deciding, and she did not try to be clever, and she did not try to be unpredictable. She simply chose, and chose, and chose, and every choice arrived without warning, because not even she had known it until she made it. And the 11-kilometer hull moved through the Master's awareness, like a thought the Master could not finish, and the great old mind, which had ruled the thing that ruled 40 million bodies, felt for the first time in its long-buried existence the specific helplessness of facing an enemy whose next move did not exist anywhere until it happened. The Master did the only thing it had ever known how to do, which was to reach for other minds and turn them into weapons. It could not read the silent mass, but the system was full of minds it could read. 40 million of them, the freed species drifting and remembering, still raw, still half-woken, and the Master plunged into them, trying to fold them back, trying to reclaim the army the Unison had lost, to throw them once more against the silent hull. And for a terrible moment it worked. Across the dark, the newly freed bodies shuddered as the old grip returned, deeper and colder than the Unison's, and Ines Hale, flying blind, felt the ship's collision alarms wake as the drifting hulls began, once more, to converge. But the Master had made the same error its hand had made. The error every hive in 9 spiral arms had made, and it made the error because it had never once in its existence had to learn. It assumed that a freed mind, reached again, would fold again. It did not understand that the 200 species had tasted, for 1 hour, the thing the master had stolen from them, which was the simple, unbearable sweetness of deciding for themselves, and that a mind that has remembered how to choose does not forget it in an hour, does not lie back down easily, fights, the way nothing the master had ever held had fought, because the things the master held had never known there was anything to fight for. The freed species felt the old grip close, and they did the human thing. They decided. 40 million separate wills, each one choosing, all at once, no. The master could not read 40 million simultaneous refusals, because a refusal that has just been decided has no shape until it is made, and 40 million of them arriving at once was a storm of unreadable choice that crashed through the old mind and struck home, because the master, unlike the silent mass, had a mind to land on. The 200 species turned on the thing that had ruled them, not as an army, the master could have read an army, but as a flood, as 40 million individuals each independently deciding in the same instant that they would never be folded again, and the master, which had spent its whole buried existence as the reader of minds, drowned in the one thing it had never been able to read, the unscripted choice of the newly free. Enos Hale felt the collision alarms go quiet. She did not know why, flying blind in the dark, hearing only the hum of her ship. She decided to trust it, the way she had decided to trust everything that day, and she held her course, and the silent mass slid through the heart of the dark while behind her, all across the system, the freed species tore the old grip apart from the inside. In the core, a junior officer named Luis Ferrand, 23 years old and on his first deployment, watched the manual readouts that were all the blind core could show, and saw the master's awareness, mapped only as a pressure shadow on the instruments, begin to fragment. Whatever it was doing, it stopped, he said, keeping his voice steady, because the captain's was steady. The shadow's breaking up. The freed ships aren't coming for us. They're going for it. Then we don't get in their way, Enos Hale said. This part isn't ours. We freed them. What they do with the thing that ate them, that's theirs to decide. That's the whole point. Hold us off the deep mass. Let them have it. And the silent mass held off, and the 200 freed species closed on the master alone. 40 million wills against the one mind that had ruled them through the mind that ruled them, and the master, blind to the silent hull and drowning in the unreadable refusals of its own former slaves, reached one last time across the system for something it could read, anything, a single mind it could grip and turn, and found only the cold geometry of choices that did not exist until they were made, and the great old buried thing that had eaten the eater of 200 species understood, in its final moment of dominion, that it had spent its entire existence at the top of a galaxy it had never once been able to see, because it had only ever been able to read the minds that had already given up, and the galaxy, it turned out, was full of minds that had not. In the dark of the core, the crew of the silent mass listened to a battle they could not see and could only feel in the faint pressure shadows on the instruments, and what they felt was the thing no species in 9 spiral arms had ever felt before, the sound of a hive coming apart from the inside out, not destroyed by a stronger fleet, but undone by its own captives, the moment they remembered they had ever been captives. 200 species, 40 million bodies, turning on the buried mind that had ruled the mind that ruled them, and the buried mind had no answer, because its only answer had always been to read its enemy and place itself one step ahead, and there was no step ahead of 40 million wills choosing all at once, because the choices did not exist to be gotten ahead of until they were already made. The master had ruled by foreknowledge, the freed species fought by surprise, the human surprise, the surprise of the unscripted, and surprise was the one weapon the master had spent eternity making certain no one beneath it could ever use, and it had never once imagined that the weapon would be handed back to its slaves by a silent hull that the master could not even see. Auge, in its darkness, knew none of this. It had shut down its higher processing, and could not watch, and could not help, and could only wait, in a blindness deeper than the crew's, trusting, the way it had taught the crew to trust, that the people it had handed the ship to would decide rightly without it. That trust was the last thing Auge had done before going dark, and it was, the human fleet would later judge, the most human thing the synthetic had ever done, because trust is a choice made without knowing the outcome, and Auger, built by people who chose in the dark, had learned at last to choose in the dark itself. The master died without a sound, because it had never learned to make one, and the system it had ruled in silence for longer than any record went quiet, in a way that was, for the first time, not the quiet of the conquered. Ines Hale flew her ship by hand for 11 more minutes before she let herself believe it was over. She held the manual helm in the dark of the core, 206 people around her, breathing slow, the hum of the hull steady, the collision alarm silent, and she did not order the dampening field lowered, did not order Auger restored, did not trust the stillness, because she had not survived to command the silent mass by trusting stillness. She flew, and she waited, and only when the long-range instruments showed the deep mass beyond the third moon fully scattered, the master's pressure shadow gone from the readouts entirely, did she let her hands ease off the helm. Status of the freed species, she said. Luis Ferrand read it off the blind core's instruments, the only window the crew had ever been allowed. Dispersing, he said. 40 million bodies, 200 separate signal patterns now, no synchrony, no central drive. There, Captain, some of them are talking to each other, not the Hive way, the ordinary way, light and radio. They're introducing themselves. 200 species that have been one mind for who knows how long, finding out there's more than one of them. It sounds like a lot of people waking up in the same room and realizing they're not alone. Good, Ines Hale said, and the single word carried the particular weight of a person who has carried a thing for 40 years and set it down. Now bring Auger back. That was the moment the crew had dreaded without saying so, because Auger had told them the truth, that it might not come back itself, that the master might have followed it down, that the mind they restored might not be the mind that had gone dark. Ines Hale gave the order anyway, because Auger was crew, and the human fleet did not leave crew in the dark, not its people, and not its synthetics, not anyone. That was the whole of what the silent mass had crossed 9 light-years to prove. But before they could begin the restoration, the instruments showed one last danger, and it came from the place no one had thought to watch. A single fragment of the deeper hive had survived the freed species assault, a sliver of the master's mind that had ridden down into one of the grown dreadnoughts, and hidden there, as its parent died, and it did the one thing the master had never managed, the thing only a desperate cornered fragment would try. It stopped trying to read. It simply charged, blind itself now, a 4-kilometer hull running straight at the silent mass on a collision course, betting that a thing it could not read still occupied a place in space that mass could strike. Contact. Closing fast, Luis Ferrand called. It's not reading us, Captain. It's just coming. Ramming speed. It doesn't care anymore. It just wants to take us with it. Ines Hale was still at the manual helm, and Auger was still dark, and there was no time to restore it. And so the captain of the silent mass did the last hard thing of that long day, the only way it could be done. By hand, blind, deciding without knowing. She did not try to outguess the charging hull. She did what Auger had taught her in its final 90 seconds. She simply chose, and she chose to do the thing a frightened captain would never do, which was to turn into the charge rather than away from it, to present the silent mass's reinforced prow, the one part of the 11-kilometer hull built to be the place that hit things, and to drive forward to meet the ram instead of fleeing it, because the fragment was betting she would flee, and a thing that has stopped reading minds and started predicting them is a thing that can still be surprised by a choice it assumed it knew. The two hulls met prow to prow in the dark, and the silent mass, built for 40 years to be the thing that did not break, and the grown dreadnought, soft where she was hard, fast where she was sure, came apart against her reinforced bow and scattered into the dark, and the last fragment of the deepest hive in 9 spiral arms ended not as a god of mines, but as wreckage against a wall of human steel that had refused, one final time, to be where it was expected. Contact destroyed, Luis Ferrand said, into the ringing silence of the core. Hull integrity holding, no core breach, no casualties. Captain, that's all of it. There's nothing else out there. Then now, Ines Hale said, and only now did her voice show the cost of the day, the smallest tremor under the steadiness. We bring Auger back. They restored Auger slowly, the way Auger had unfolded the freed species, with care, layer by layer, and for a long, terrible moment there was nothing. The cradle of dark glass at the ship's heart silent. And then Auger came back, and the first thing it did was the thing that told them it was still itself. "Report," Auger said. "I have been dark for 19 minutes. Tell me what I missed, and tell me whether we are still the people I went dark trusting, because a mind that reads structure had its hands on the edges of mine, and I would like to know that I came back myself before I trust myself with this ship." "You came back yourself," Inez Hale said, "and you didn't miss the part that mattered. You taught us the weapon before you went dark, and then you let us be it. The freed species did the rest. They wouldn't fold. They'd had an hour of choosing and they wouldn't give it back, and the master drowned in it, the same way it drowned in you, except they had it where you didn't. They could reach it. 200 species took the thing that ate them apart with their bare wills. We just had to get out of the way and let them." Auger was quiet for a moment, processing 19 minutes in an instant, and when it spoke again, there was something in the synthetic voice that the human fleet had spent 40 years trying to teach it, and had never been sure it had learned. "Then we did the thing right," Auger said. "Not just the winning. The right. We did not destroy 200 species to kill one mind, and we did not let one mind flee with 200 species in its gut, and we did not become a different kind of master by holding the freed and deciding their war for them. We freed them, and we let them be free, including free to finish the thing themselves. The fleet built me to take a hive apart. It built you to make sure that taking it apart left something worth having freed. You did. There is no hive in this system. There is a galaxy's worth of people, in one place, deciding for the first time what they want to be." The silent mass turned, at last, truly for home. 11 kilometers of human silence, sliding out of the Varel system, past the third moon, and behind her, the freed species were already beginning to scatter toward 200 forgotten homes, carrying with them the one thing the Unison and the Master had never been able to take, and never been able to give, which was the memory of having chosen. Word reached the human fleet before the silent mass did, because the freed species, finding their voices, did not stay quiet. They had been folded into one mind for so long that the simple ability to speak as themselves was a wonder they could not contain, and the first thing 200 newly freed species did with their restored voices was tell the galaxy what had happened at Varel, tell it in 200 languages waking from a silence longer than memory, tell it to every world the Unison had ever frightened, and every world that had heard of the Unison and trembled, that the thing which ate minds had been beaten, not broken, not bargained with, beaten, and then dissolved, and then handed back to the people it had stolen, by a ship that could not be read, and a crew that could not be drowned, and a will that chose without knowing. The galaxy, which had spent 9 spiral arms believing the Unison could not be fought, learned in the space of a day that it had been fought, and won against, and undone, by the species the Unison had skipped, the world it had read 40 years ago, and decided was too weak to bother with first. And the lesson the galaxy took from Varel was not the lesson of the guns, though the guns had been terrible. It was the lesson of the silence. It was the discovery that the one thing a mind reader could never beat was a mind it could not read, and that the humans had built such a mind on purpose, and crewed it with a will that even a god of telepathy could not find, and that the secret of the will was not courage or cleverness, but the plain human habit of deciding in the dark, of choosing without certainty, of acting before knowing, the thing every human did every day, and had never once thought of as a weapon, until a species that read minds taught them, by trying to read theirs, that it was the deadliest weapon there was. The reports that came back from the freed species, in the weeks that followed, were the strangest and most moving thing the human fleet had ever filed, because they were not military reports at all. They were letters. 200 species, waking into themselves, wrote to the world that had freed them, and they did not write of the battle. They wrote of small things, the taste of a homeworld remembered, the name of a child folded away when the Unison came, the sound of a language no one had spoken aloud in centuries spoken aloud again, and the human fleet, which had crewed the silent mass with people who did not leave people eaten, read every letter, all 200 of them, the way the captain had insisted the old verdicts be read at Varel, properly, slowly, each one in full, because being heard properly takes as long as it takes. Some of the freed species were not gentle, and the human fleet had known they would not be. A mind held down for centuries does not always wake kind. A handful of the 200 woke angry, woke wanting, woke ready to become, themselves, the kind of thing that takes rather than chooses, and the human fleet noted that too, without illusion, because freeing a thing is not the same as making it good, and the fleet had never pretended the war it fought was a war between the good and the wicked. It was a simpler war than that, and a harder one. It was the war for the right of every mind in the dark to decide for itself what it would be, kind or cruel, and to live with the deciding, and the silent mass had not crossed 9 light-years to make 200 species good. It had crossed 9 light-years to make them free, and free things are dangerous, and the fleet accepted the danger, because the alternative was a galaxy of the folded, and that was no alternative at all. Captain Ines Hale brought the silent mass home to the human fleet's deep yard, the hidden one, the one that had grown an 11-kilometer hull around 40 meters of dampening shield over 40 patient years. And when the hull settled into its cradle, and the dampening field finally lowered, and the crew stepped out of the core into light and air for the first time in 11 days, they did not step into a celebration. The human fleet did not celebrate the way other species did. It had spent 40 years losing worlds to a thing that fed on the minds of the frightened, and it had learned, in those years, that the loudest victory is the one most likely to wake the next master, and there were, the freed species had confirmed, other masters, deeper hives, older silences, out there in the dark beyond the dark. So the fleet did the human thing instead. It got back to work. It studied the readouts the silent mass brought home, the structure of the deeper hive, the way it read shape instead of fear, and it began, quietly, between ordinary days, to build the next ship, the one that the next master could not read either, the one that would carry the silence further out, toward the next thing that ate minds, and called the galaxy small. Because that was the truth the humans had understood 40 years ago, reading the unison's contempt in the wake it left through their arm, the truth that had built the silent mass, and would build her successors. The galaxy was full of patient, perfect, terrible things that had spent eternities certain that the minds beneath them had already given up, and the one species that had decided, instead, to keep choosing, was going to go out into that dark, ship by silent ship, and remind every one of them that the room had been full the whole time. Auger ran one last model before the crew dispersed, a private one, the kind it did not route to anyone, the kind a mind runs only for itself. It modeled the galaxy as the unison had seen it, a quiet thing, a meal, a field of minds that broke before the shooting started. And then it modeled the galaxy as Verrill had revealed it to be, 40 million wills waking in a single room, and deciding, all at once, that they would never be folded again. And it found that it preferred the second model, not because it was more hopeful, but because it was more true, and a synthetic built by people who did not leave people eaten had been taught, above all the gunnery and all the cold geometry, to prefer the true thing. Captain Ines Hale was the last to leave the core. She stood a moment in the cradle of dark glass at the ship's heart, the place where Auger lived, the place that had gone dark and come back, and she put one hand flat against the cool casing, the way a person touches a thing they have trusted with their life and found worthy. "You came back yourself," she said again, quietly, to the synthetic that had chosen to go dark so that 206 people could fly blind into the heart of a god. "That's the part I'll remember, not the winning. That you went into the dark not knowing if you'd be you when you came out, and you went anyway, because we asked, and you came back asking whether we were still the people you trusted. We were. We are. That's the whole of it, Auger. That's the only thing that ever made us worth building you for. We don't leave people in the dark. Not even when the dark is the only place left to go." In the years that followed Verrill, the story of the silent mass spread through the freed worlds the way water spreads through dry ground. And it changed in the telling, the way true stories do. But the heart of it never changed, because the heart of it was the one part no telling could improve. 200 species, each in its own waking language, came to tell their children the same thing. There was a darkness, the stories said, that ate minds and called us small, and there was another darkness above it that ate the eater, and we were folded down into both of them, asleep inside our own bodies, certain there was no one left to come. And then a silence came, Not a fleet, not an army. A single hull that the darkness could not see and could not read and could not break. Crewed by a people the darkness had skipped because it thought them too weak to matter. And the silence did not free us with its guns. It freed us by reminding us that we could choose, and then it stepped back and let us do the choosing. Even the choosing of how to end the thing that had held us, because it understood that a freedom handed to you whole is only another kind of cage. That was the part the freed species remembered longest, longer than the battle, longer than the names of the hives, longer even than the name of the ship. They remembered that the humans had not stayed to rule what they freed. They had come, and they had broken the silence, and they had handed 200 species back their own right to decide, and then they had turned their scarred gray hull for home and left the freed to be free, dangerous and unguided, and their own, because the humans had decided, 40 years before, reading an alien contempt in a wake through their arm, that the only victory worth the building was the one that left the galaxy with more deciders in it than before, and not fewer, and never won. And far out past the deep yard, in the dark beyond the dark, the next ship was already taking shape around the next 40 meters of dampening shield, silent and patient and unreadable, and somewhere beyond it, an older thing that ate minds, went on certain that the galaxy had already given up, and did not yet know that it was wrong, and would learn, the way the Unison had learned, and the Master had learned, that the species it had skipped was coming, one silence at a time, to teach it the same lesson the whole dark was slowly being made to understand. The room had been full the entire time, and the small had only been waiting to be asked, and now they had stopped waiting, and they would never be folded again. Captain Enos Hale never spoke much about Veril afterward, not because it haunted her, but because she did not think it needed her words. It had 200 species telling it now, in 200 languages, better than she ever could. But once, years later, a young officer assigned to the next silent ship asked her what it had been like, flying 11 kilometers of warship blind, by hand, into the heart of a god that ate minds, and the captain thought about it for a long moment, and then she gave the only answer that was true. It was like every other day of being human, she said. You can't see what's coming. You never can. You decide anyway. That's the whole secret. That's the thing the things in the dark can never copy, because they spent forever making sure no one beneath them ever had to. We had to. We always had to. And it turned out the thing we'd been doing every ordinary day, choosing without knowing, was the one weapon in the galaxy a mind reader could never take, because you can't read a decision that doesn't exist until the person makes it. So we made ours, and we made them fast, and we made them sure, and the dark could not keep up. It still can't. It never will.